Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Angie Kaufman. I am a registered veterinary technician, and I work with NOAA. I am part of the Hawaiian monk seal research program. I work with many scientists and very closely with our veterinarian. So Hawaiian monk seals, as you heard, are endangered. So basically every seal counts. The Hawaiian monk seal population, there is a small population in the main Hawaiian Islands, about 300, but the majority of them actually live up in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands are protected by the Hanauma Monument, and that kind of indicates that we can't just go there because we want to. So we do have permits, and there's research that goes on out there. So kind of we have to understand the population by making special visits with our researchers. And really the only way to get there, with the exception of Midway, which is up here, is by ship. So this population is rather remote. We can't access them year-round. We have to take a ship, and it has to be scheduled unless we get a special flight out to Midway. So how do we know that the monk seals are endangered if people don't go out there? We have Northwestern Hawaiian field camps. So field camps go out about April. They stay there till about August to September. It really depends on the ship's schedule. But there's a group of people that go onto each one of those islands that was up before, and they live in tents on a beach for about 4 months or so. So it is quite an event. It takes a full year of planning. Our field camps just came back a couple weeks ago, and we're already planning for the next field season. So you have to plan their food. You have to bring all their water. They have propane stoves. We do have some solar power panels, but there's no internet. You don't call, your mom on a Sunday. There's satellite phones for emergencies and maybe some casual calls, but for the most part, you're out there to work. Can't complain because that's your view every day. So to give some idea of what these groups of people do, they do surveys of the Hawaiian monk seal. This is how we know their numbers. We go out every year, so we can kind of get a better idea of how the population is doing overall that year. And they've been going out since the 80s. So since the 80s, almost every single year, we've had a very hefty population assessment, and we actually ID almost every single seal that's out there. So to ID a seal, there is these tags that we put on the back of their flippers. Every seal gets a unique tag. So there's no, once you have the tag in, that's its permanent ID. You can't mistake it from another seal from years past. And you're not going to give it the same tag or any other seal that tag in the future. So everyone basically gets a name. Some other examples of things that field camps do, it's not just identifying seals. There is a lot of marine debris out in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. There's not a constant group of people to clean up that debris. So sometimes not just monk seals, but turtles and birds do get entangled. If the camps see that, they will absolutely try to disentangle if it's safe for them and the seal. And another just example of what they do out there is we are doing vaccinations on Hawaiian monk seals against some morbillivirus. The morbillivirus in monk seals has not reached monk seals yet, but this virus has caused huge amounts of die-offs in North America. So we're preliminary vaccinating them because if that virus was to come here, it would wipe out the species. So that's just an example of some of the things that they do. They do actually do many more things, but that's a whole nother lecture in itself. So how do we know when a seal should be considered for rehabilitation? Luckily, we've been studying them long enough, we kind of have an idea of what a healthy seal is. So for moms and pups, the peak of the pupping season is between April and July. That's when our field camps usually go out. So right when the pups are born, most of the time, our staff's actually on the island, and they actually will see the pup like the next day. There was no pup there, then ta-da, it's his birthday. Like you just saw it. So we know about when they're born. They do nurse on average from 5 to 7 weeks. That usually creates a healthy pup, or what we consider healthy. There are chances when a pup will wean earlier than that, and they're on the thinner side. So we keep kind of track of their life cycles and what happens to them. If they nurse more than 7 weeks, we just feel sorry for the mom because that pup needs to go. So the mom leaves the pup when it weans. So the mom actually takes off. The whole time she's nursing the pup, she's actually not eating. So before they give birth, the adult females are very large. They have to reserve their fat stores and to give it to the pup because they know they're going to be on the beach or at least close to shore the whole time, not getting any food for themselves. So during that time, they have a pretty significant weight loss. However, that means when the pups are weaned, they are completely on their own. So there's not this huge learning curve like we have with our parents, what seems like forever. These pups are kind of one day the mom's gone and they're just out to fend for themselves. That's the natural cycle for the Hawaiian monk seal. Now, when they wean, they become super fat wean pups. So this is a very healthy wean pup. They have to be fat. In order to learn how to forage on their own, it's going to take a lot of practice, a lot of swimming, a lot of energy. So you have to have a big, hefty fat supply to be able to survive through that learning curve. So as I said, they're learning to forage. They're not very good at it, but practice makes perfect. They also begin to interact with other seals. So a pup with its mom pretty much knows its mom. If anything is to approach the pup, whether it be a seal or even a shark or a giant alua, the mom is very defensive. So the mom defends the pup, and the pup doesn't get that much interaction per se, maybe a little bit. But once they're weaned, no holds bar, anybody can come up to the pup. So it's a big learning curve. Sometimes it's wonderful experiences. They find other weaned pups and they play and they, figure each other out. They try to sometimes suckle off each other because they really don't know what's going on. But sometimes it's a little bit more rough housing, especially with adult seals, running into sharks and just figuring out life because as we know, Mother Nature is not always super awesome. But when they become juveniles, about a year later, they will naturally slim down. So that is why they have to be so fat, because it takes quite a bit of time to learn. So a juvenile will be about the length of a weaned pup, but quite a bit thinner. And then they're also going to develop a green algae on their fur. That's just because they're in the water so long trying to figure life out. The Hawaiian monk seal does molt their fur every year. But at this point, the juveniles still have their original fur from when they were weaned. So they're going to be green. That's normal. And sometimes they get like bright green. This guy is only a little bit green. He's got some time to go. This is really the critical learning curve for foraging. So for the Hawaiian monk seal, the rate when they, to use the negative term, when they die off is actually in the early stages. So from being a pup to being about 3 years old, that's going to be the highest point of when there's going to be a decline. So it's really critical to learn how to forage early. You have to learn not only on your own and where to find the food, but you're competing with sharks, you're competing with alua, and a big adult monk seal can actually fight those predators off, whereas a small monk seal doesn't always win. So the most of the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, the sharks are interested in the seals. They're interested in what the seal caught. So it's really animals stealing the food is the theory of why it's kind of tricky between pup to 3 years old. And once you turn about 3 years old, on average, that's when you're pretty good to go. You know what you're doing, and the success rate goes up. So what are we looking for when it comes to considering a seal for rehab? This is a normal body condition of the seal. So you don't see any bones. They're pretty round. This seal looks particularly healthy. This is kind of what we want to see. What is striking is when we have a thin or emaciated seal. So as you can see, right here is a very pronounced hip bone. Right here is especially alarming where the shoulder is sticking out, and this is kind of what we call a peanut head, if you will. The neck should be quite a bit bigger, but this guy is definitely considered emaciated. He's not doing so hot. This would be a very strong candidate for rehabilitation. So that's one thing that we really want to focus on is the hips and the ribs. Now, anytime you're on a beach, you could be in a divot, you could be over a rock, and sometimes how your body's positioned, you can actually see some bones just because all the fat went back down here. So this is observations over time. This guy's on the right is pretty obvious, but there are other seals, if they happen to be laying funky, you can see their ribs. It doesn't necessarily mean they're skinny until maybe you can see them kind of move around and get an overall body condition. But the number one reason baby seals especially, come into rehab is malnourishment. Now, there are other reasons why seals could come into rehab. The seals from the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands is primarily malnourishment, but sometimes other things happen. Now, here in the main Hawaiian Islands, we have about 300 seals or so. They like to get into trouble, so there's other reasons why they might need medical attention. So an abandoned pup is very rare. That's not a normal thing for us to see. It has happened a couple of times. If we catch it, we're going to catch it in the main Hawaiian Islands. There's not anything they can do in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands unless the medical team is like a couple days away. So here in the main Hawaiian Islands, we have so many volunteers that go out and just look for seals. They report back to us. And if we hear of an abandoned pup, we will absolutely intervene. Like Hoa over at the aquarium, he was one of those guys, but he's doing great now. Another reason to go into rehab is injuries. This tends to be more short term. When we say rehabilitation, on average, especially for malnourishment, we're talking several months. Injuries, like getting a hook or something of that magnitude, is usually much shorter. Now, this particular photo is actually only in the back of the throat. This is actually a very minor hooking, if you will. Something like this, we would bring the seal into our facility here on Oahu, put the seal under either heavy sedation or anesthesia, and we actually would reach in the mouth of the seal and pull the hook out. Obviously, you want them well under it if you're going to put your hand in their mouth. This guy was a procedure that, took about 30 minutes because it was kind of dug in different tissues, and you've got those barbs on the hook. They're hard to get out. But once we got the hook out, gave him some antibiotics, he actually was released that day. So when we're helping animals, for wild animals, they actually heal most of the time better out in the wild, per se, because they can move around on their own. They can eat a lot better. They're less stressed. So hospital, even a human hospital, can be quite stressful. So if we feel like they will improve out in the wild, we would prefer that. Other times we have taken a couple hooks out of the stomach, which is a major surgery. So just like humans, you're going to stay in the hospital for a little bit longer. One seal, Benny, he's well known to us. He has had surgery twice out the stomach. And that recovery time is at least a couple of weeks, where we do keep him at the IRC facility, where he's got a big pool and swim around and be happy. Okay, another reason to bring seals into rehab is if they're sick. The sickness for monk seals, it's hard to detect because usually they don't exhibit signs until they're almost past the point of having help. So in this picture, there is a seal in here, what we would call logging. Basically, seals will hang out at the top of the water. They might look up to breathe. They might, just kind of hang out. They don't really move their flippers. They'll kind of list in the shallows and let the wave kind of push their body around. We consider that to be logging, and that needs to be a behavior we observe over a couple of days. Some cases lately, you might have heard how we're concerned about toxoplasmosis. That is fatal to monk seals. We have brought in seals before that we couldn't help, and they eventually passed on their own. So we do want to give every seal a chance. If there is a seal that's logging, we're concerned. We'll bring it in no matter what and try to do the best we can. Okay, back to the fun stuff. This is back in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So twice a year, the NOAA ship is going to drop the campers off. They're going to stay out for their 4 months or so. We're going to come back with the ship and pick them up. Those 2 times are when we're going to bring seals into rehabilitation, because we have a vet team actually on the ship. Now, when we drop seals off, we drop campers off. I think of them as seals too. No, we drop off the campers. We also drop off all their stuff. So that's what this mess is. So we drop them off. We drop off their stuff. We say good luck and, do good things. However, we're going to return in 3 days. So while you're at it, go find us some seals. As you can see, they're really busy trying to get their stuff up, but the whole reason why we're out there is to find these animals. And this is kind of like a luck of the draw when we have not had any eyes on the beach for months at a time. When we're walking the island, we're kind of hoping we happen to find seals that need help. So if the campers do come across a seal, they'll pick it up, they'll bring it back to camp, And when the vet gets there, they will look at it and decide whether or not we can take it on a ship. So it's a very short amount of time when we go to drop off the camps in about April. So the end of the season is a little bit easier as far as detecting who needs help. Often seals will come into camp and sleep and hang out and, burp and fart, and that's great. You always know when a seal is in camp. So over the course of the season, if a camper sees a seal, you don't touch it, but you record what you see. You have to take lots of photos, and all that information comes back to Honolulu for the vet team. So the vet team will track the seal, and this is when it's pretty challenging because you have to be pretty objective with what you're saying. You can't say a seal looks sick, because what does that mean? Can you see ribs? Is it having trouble breathing? Is it taking short breaths, long breaths? So our team is actually very well trained for very specific things to look for. And those descriptions come back to Honolulu. And as I said, it's remote, so they can't send us videos. In most cases, they can't even send us pictures. We just have to go off of their words. So if over the course of the month or months, the veterinarian will be like, yes, I agree. I'm concerned about that seal. If you find it 3 days before the ship arrives, still have that criteria, please capture it, and then you're going to put it in a shore pen. So this is kind of the holding facility for the monk seal. The bottom, right, this is actually a seal, this log-looking thing. It's in a pallet tub. It's got some water. Of course, we want it to have shade. We like to have fences that have lots of holes in them for the air movement because it can get extremely hot out there. So we want to only keep them there for 3 days. The reason is remember that being kind of cooped up can be extra stressful, and these seals are already in an elevated sign or type of stress, like if they're really sick. So they could be on the tipping point of too much stress would actually do them more harm than good. So there's not an exact science to it, but you kind of have to have a hard line to tell your team 3 days is what you got. And then if there's any indication the seal is rapidly declining because it's stressed, then you would let it go, because we want to give them as much chance as they can, and we don't want to do any unintentional harm to them. So 3 days, they catch a seal, and then the veterinarian who is on the ship actually comes off the ship up to the seal and does a little preliminary exam. And the veterinarian will actually be the one to determine whether or not the seal comes on the ship. So we have a seal. This is a little guy. He's in an extra large dog kennel. We're actually fantastic for containing the bitey end of the seal. So we don't want to carry the seal around in loose nets. They actually can bite through that, even though they might be a little bit small. Their jaws are still quite powerful. So they get to be put in this little dog kennel, lots of airflow. They get windows, they can check out the sights, and then they get put in a small boat, and that small boat actually transports the seal to the ship. So the ship can't get terribly close to the island. It depends on which island you go to. Sometimes the ship can get a 10-minute boat drive away. Sometimes it's a half an hour. So you have to take that into consideration as far as time of day, the stress of the animal, what else is going on the ship. But once the small boat arrives, they actually do lift the small boat out of the water, and then we have to pass the seal in the cage over to ship side. So on the ship, this seal's having quite a day. So we get him on the ship, and if the seal's really wigging out, really stressing out, we'll put him in a cage and leave him alone to kind of relax. If I say he, it could be he or she. If the seal is doing pretty good, we're going to start with the admin exam. So the admin exam is going to be our base point to really know how well the seal progresses in rehab. And it's really important to get that done the first day if can. So weight is pretty critical. We really track their progress by how much weight they gain. We definitely don't ever want them to lose weight. So you definitely need a weight. The blood checks that we do on the ship are more, not quite as robust as what you can get here on the mainland, just because we can't have those machines on the ship. But we can do some basic blood work, and what we're looking for values that are off the charts. Like their white blood cell count is huge, they have a major infection or something like that. So we'll get that type of blood check, and the vet assessment is going to be listening to the heart, listening to the lungs. Anytime we go to the doctor, it's a basic physical. So that's going to be where we start with the vet exam. And then they get to settle in. These are the two guys that we just brought back this month. And we like to pair them up together. So if you can kind of imagine an alien plucking you out of your wonderful home and sticking you somewhere you have no idea where you are, you're going to want a friend. So on the ship, we like to keep them buddy to buddy, as long as they get along. You know, sometimes kids fight, so they have to be separated. But these guys, we try to keep them together. It keeps the stress down, because on the ship, as much as we try to be quiet, there's still operations going. There's cranes going. People aren't allowed to like go in and talk to them or look at them too closely, because we want them to have a nice, as comfortable atmosphere as we can make it in this type of situation. So on the ship, we have to do medical. This guy, his name is Niho'ole. He's one of our more pathetic seals. He was a pre-weaned pup. When we captured him, you can see he's kind of got a wound here, and a wound here, and you can't see it, but there's one on top of his head. We don't exactly know what caused this. We do know that some adult males were kind of roughhousing with him a little bit beforehand. So it's possible it could be punctures from that or something. But I will say I was a part of this capture. He was covered in maggots. Oh. Yeah, so he looks pretty poorly. And then I was covered in maggots, and I felt pretty poorly. So he came in, but medical is so important, because this is a time when you could do fine or you could crash. So all seals are going to get some type of fluids. Sub-Q fluids are going to be very helpful. We also give oral fluids, but 9 times out of 10, these guys are very dehydrated. And then this is our veterinarian. This is Michelle Barbieri. She kind of hangs out with the seal for a little bit, makes sure they're not into a tipping point over the edge, and can do an assessment. And if they're at a point where they're stable, then they go into a cage and can rest comfortably. But they do get checkups all the time. So feeding, fun fact, this was during Hurricane Lane. I was on the ship when that came about. Luckily, we were able to come to port right before the storm hit, and being on the leeward side, we actually didn't get completely swamped with wind. But we did have to wait for squalls to pass by before we actually could feed these guys. But this was our girl. We open up the cage. We do try to encourage them to come out on their own, as that's the least amount of stress. But we do have to handle them. So the reason is, when weaned pups leave their moms, they've never eaten fish. So they actually have a hard time understanding this whole like fish equals swallow equals full thing. So they need a little bit of extra help. So we do have to hold them, because we give them a straw, and that's a fish smoothie. So we have a whole kitchen on the ship where we blend up fish and give it to them. So it's not exactly a straw. This is a stomach tube. It's bypassing their swallowing apparatus into the stomach and directly putting the food in there. It's very critical that they start to get calories right away, as that's the whole reason why we have them. And they get herring. So it's actually human quality grade herring. It's very high in calories, very high in fat, very high in nutrients. So we want to try to plump them up as best we can. So on the ship, they are, medicated. They are fed. They are on 24-hour watch. These guys are tricky, because if you have an animal in a pen, it's going to look for stuff to do. And we try to give it stuff to do, but you have to be careful. They are under watch 24 hours a day. That means 3 a.m. someone's out there constantly watching these animals. We've had times where if someone didn't happen to look over, there was a plastic bit that fell in the pen, and of course the seal went right for it to try to eat it, so you have to be very careful with these guys. And also you have to make sure you don't miss any abnormalities, any health issues, because those can just spring right up without any notice. So we're looking for danger, and we're also looking for health. And I just want to emphasize, if the seal can cause trouble, they're going to cause trouble. They're going to chew the tarp. They're going to try to flip over the cage. They're going to try to beat each other up. Like, that's what kids do, I guess. I don't know. So they're fun. Always something happens, and it's always at 2 a.m. unexpected events. These seals are just coming into care. They actually might be unstable. So some things that we are worried about are seizures, if they become unresponsive, or if they crash. So we have the Niho, the really skinny, pathetic seal from before, did have a seizure on board at 2 a.m. Because someone was watching it, we actually were able to grab the veterinarian out of bed, gave him his glucose shots, and he kind of recovered, but he was always on watch. So the reason why that can happen sometimes is if you've emaciated, you haven't been eating, and you start getting some calories, your blood sugar can kind of do this and it could tank. So he was a special seal. Normally they get 3 meals a day. He got 6. Everyone's like, what's up with that? So he was very special. So we are done on the ship. Could be 3 days on the ship. It could be 2 weeks on the ship. Depends where we are on the chain and, the other islands and what's going on. So we want to keep the seals on the ship as least amount of time as possible to decrease their stress. But once they're done, they're going to go to Ke Kaiola. Now, to get them there, I like to show this picture because this was about 2:33 in the morning when we happened to get to port. So she's back in her dog kennel. We're ready to go. We're hyped up on caffeine. Let's do this. So the seal goes back over the ship into the small boat, which you can't tell is hanging over the water, and then we drop down, and then we're on our way to Ke Kaiola at 3 a.m. So Ke Kaiola, the Healing Sea. This is the hospital on the Big Island that is for monk seals. So you can see one big pool of air. Behind the pool, you've got 2 small pools. They call them kiki pools. If a very more debilitated animal comes in, they can't get out of the water on their own. They have a smaller space for them. And these big pools, they actually do have 2 of those in case they have multiple animals. So the primary activity for Ke Kaiola is going to be husbandry and veterinary care. They do have another veterinarian on staff. They have vet tech, and they also have husbandry to feed the animals. Because one animal, they feed them 3 times a day. They're cool. 7 animals, that's all types of planning and things like that. You need a lot of people. So Ke Kaiola really runs on volunteer support. They do have a small staff, but they have 50 people coming in every week to help with every meal and to help clean up after them and to help, observe, because there's a lot that can go on in a hospital. It is an extension of the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito. So this group, if you're familiar with them, is in California. They deal with hundreds of animals a day. They know what they're doing. So this is a little bit of extension that they got some private funding and things like that to build in Hawaii just for the monk seal to try to help us out. So I wanted to go through some patients that have been to Ke Kaiola from the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. KFO4 is the perm idea that our group gives them, and when they go to the hospital, they get a name. So this is Meliana. She is from Kure. She came in September 2014. You can see down here, she's got her little hip bone sticking out. She's got her shoulder sticking out. And this is what we would kind of consider to be a peanut head. So she's a weaned pup. She's supposed to be as fat as that one picture I showed you before. She is not. She was only 18.5 kgs. That's very tiny for a seal. She's emaciated, anemic, and dehydrated. She had this interesting vocalization thing where she would move her vocal cords constantly, which is where she got Meliana as her name. And she actually still does it to this day. So she's special. So March in 2015, she came back as a yearling. So she weighed 103 kilograms. So in 6 months, gained 84 kgs. So that's quite an improvement from her. Pua actually came in the same time as Meliana. Pua was from Laysan. She was a weaned pup. She was a little bit bigger at 23, which is still small. She's just malnourished. She wasn't going to make it till next year. She was too tiny. So she came in with Melee, and she looked great. After that amount of time, a yearling, weighed 115 kgs when she was relieved with 92 kgs in 6 months. She liked to eat, and that's what we like. So Maka'ala. So Maka'ala was actually a juvenile, 1 year old. You can see she's kind of got some extra foldy skin right here. She wasn't She was small for a yearling, not completely sickly. She weighed 44 kgs, which is light, so malnourished. We actually only kept her for a couple of months. And even just in a couple of months, you can see her doesn't have quite as much of a waist anymore, which is a good thing. Released as a yearling at 60 kgs, so she gained 16 kgs in 2 months, which is a shorter stint. But July is when we dropped off the field camp. September is when we picked him up. That's the ship schedule for NOAA. We have no control over that. So that happened to be her schedule. Worked out fine for her. And then YK56, Meaola. This is not a healthy looking seal. She's got bad hip bones right here. She's even upright. You can still see the ribs. And this is very much a peanut head. So she's a skeleton. She came in August 2016. She was admitted as what we call a subadult. So if my memory serves me correctly, I think that she was 4 years old, almost to the adult phase. But this is actually unusual for a subadult. So she was skinny, malnourished, she only weighed 41 kgs. The juvenile weighed 44. And we did all types of blood tests on her to see if there was a reason as an adult she was so skinny. And nothing came out of the blood work that was really astonishing. She was pretty normal blood work wise. So she ate and she ate and she ate again. And she was released as an adult, 180 kgs, 139 kgs in 8 months. She's one of our favorites. It's like, this seal looks like she ate this seal and it became 2 seals. So she's very special. So how do we know when a seal is ready to be released? Of course, we don't want to release them too early. So there's a couple of guidelines. We're still learning, but obviously you want a healthy body condition. If a seal comes in emaciated, we're not going to release it thin. We got to wait till it's at least medium. Really importantly, they have to be able to successfully catch and eat their own fish. So the majority of the fish they eat are the dead herring because they need that caloric and the nutrition and the fat. They don't eat dead fish in the wild. That's not a normal thing. So you have to make sure that when they transition back, that they can swim and catch fish, and they actually want to do that. So at the facility, they have less nutritional fish, tilapia, maybe some others that they can sneak in there. We watch their behavior, make sure their instincts kick in. They can swim and catch the fish, have a grand old time. So that's an important test to pass. They have to not be habituated by people. So at Kaikaiola, a lot of the fences had like holes and stuff like that, so they could see people if they looked up. That's not necessarily a good thing. We don't want seals associating people with food. Luckily, these guys are going back to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands where there are no people. However, that we don't want them to wait for someone to show up to feed them. They're just going to decline again. So people and food for seals is not good. So we try to minimize any type of association with humans. The most very important criteria, they have to have transportation to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. So as I mentioned before, there's no planes that go. There's only a ship. In extreme cases, you can charter a ship. Most of us don't have a few $100,000 in our back pocket. So we kind of just wait for the NOAA ships to go. We have in extreme circumstances when the seals are really healthy. There was a flight to Midway on the Coast Guard, and they could take them. That doesn't happen all that often. That's a favor from the Coast Guard. Obviously, the Coast Guard's busy doing other things like saving people, but they had an extra trip. So me and another staff member actually took 2 seals on the flight. Then on Midway, we got on another ship and headed up to Curate and actually released them there in the winter. Winter travel on a ship's not fun, I'll tell you that right now, but they were released at that site. It would be great if we could do that often, but that's just not the case. All right, so all those patients are fat and happy and healthy. They go back on the ship. So before, this is to remind you what they looked like. They're all cute and cuddly. They can fit in a cage. And after, they're not cute and cuddly anymore. They look cuddly, but man, they are very energetic. They got all their energy back. So they like to hang out and constantly talk. They talk and talk and talk to each other. Feeding. So feeding is a little bit different. There's no longer the tubing situation, which is great. We do not have to touch the animals when they're feeding or when they're eating fish. This is a dog bowl with fish in it. It doesn't exactly look like that. The seal would have no idea what to do if that was the case. So what we'll do is we'll have big bins that actually will fit the seal's whole body in there, fill that with water, put the fish in there. If we could have a tank they could swim in on the ship, that would be great, but that's just ridiculous for that to happen. So we do the best we can. We've even fed seals like through the slots, like so they can't see us. We're completely blocked, and all of a sudden a fish appears. And because when you look up, that's actually how they swallow. They can't swallow like this. Their esophagus is kind of cut off, so they have to go like this. It just goes down the hatch. Some seals are great at that. Some seals not so much. But they have to get the fish in this position long ways, obviously, because that's the direction it's going down. If the seal tries to eat it sideways, it just turns into fish mash. They spit it out, and then they're like, what happened? Like, that wasn't my fault. So 24-hour care and watch again. These guys look super cute, but they are just sometimes little demons. They want to push the fence over. They want to get into anything. So you have to be very careful with these cute faces, because not only are they fat and healthy, they're poop machines. They are just pooping everywhere. So this is a constant cleaning. So maybe you're not so much on like seizure watch or crashing watch. You are on poop cleaning watch. So they, the back of the ship smells awesome. So back home, this is back to their home. They come to the beach. Most seals are released at their birth island. We try to make it the case every single time. Sometimes logistically, the weather's too bad. We can't go to that island. We don't have enough time. They have to go to a different island. We try to not make that the case. We want them to go back to their home island to try to be in a place that is the most familiar. So when they go there, they actually held in shore pens again. So why is that? Months they've been in rehab, and they've had a concrete pool, and they've had dead fish, to deal with. It's a completely different environment. Then they're on the ship, and they got the loud noises, and they got the people, and now they're all of a sudden on a beach. That can actually be pretty shocking. So to prevent the seals from bolting, running away, and never coming back, we want to get them reacquainted with their environment. So once again, 3 days is all they need. They'll still get fed to make sure they don't lose any weight. And then they kind of relax, get used to being in the sun again, get used to being in the sand. And even seals can come up the beach and kind of sniff and check them out. They can't get through the gates, but they kind of are like, oh yeah, this is where I come from. After the 3 days, they're released back home. And on the seal, maybe you can kind of see it, is going to be a satellite transmitter. We try to put them on most of the patients, and that way the satellites can pick up where they go. So in case when the field camp is there and they don't see the animal, we can actually look on the satellite and see where it is to make sure it didn't take off to a different island or take off to the middle of the ocean, or maybe it's just behind that bush, you can't see it, something like that. So out of all of this, we started rehabbing seals at Keikaiola in July of 2014. So I just included some numbers from May of 2017. We have seals in-house right now, and then we release seals in August, but it's a little bit too soon to tell how well they've done. So I just included this group. So this is 21 seals total. We had 15 weaned pups, 5 juveniles, 1 subadult. There are males and females mixed in there, but it is primarily females. We tend to take in more females than males because the females have the pups. So when you save a female, you save her future generations as well. Doesn't mean we won't take the males, just we're a little biased. So seeing this year in the summer by our field staff, 8 seals total. 4 that were weaned pups, 3 that were juveniles, and that same subadult is Maeola. So these numbers can be kind of surprising. Like, what's up with that? You made them fat and healthy. We're still learning, and there's some challenges that we have to come across. So first of all, don't get slapped by your friend in the face. So healthy body condition does not guarantee foraging skills. So as much as we feed them in the pool, we try to give them live fish, that doesn't translate to the open ocean. And that's a very tricky thing to simulate. If, we had acres of pools, that'd be different. But the reality is they have what they have, and that's what they need to learn. Aspects of habitat we cannot control. When they go back out in the ocean, they go back out with the sharks, they go back out with the alua, they go back out with other giant seals, They also go back out with marine debris, and they could get injuries from who knows what. They can get stuck places. There are just things that are part of Mother Nature that we can't help. So you can't expect 100% success rate. That's just not how nature works. And then we also cannot find the seals that need the most assistance. We have the days when the ship arrives. You got 3 days to find a seal. Do your best. Those seals are out trying to forage and figure things out. They may not just show up. Same thing as during the summer. They have a seal that we've been tracking day after day, week after week. A month before the ship comes, the seal disappears. So it happens. It's just kind of the reality of the situation, what we have to work with. So where are they now? So Miliana is on Lizianski. So she traveled from Curie to Lizzie. She's 4 years old, and she's very fat. We are very pleased with how she looks. I mentioned she does that kind of vocal cord thing. She still does it today. Actually, was out there last month, saw her on one of my walks, which was awesome to see a seal that you help with rehab, and she was doing the same thing. And I was like, that's interesting. Then we have Pua. Pua is on Curie. She is now 4 years old. That's about what an average 4-year-old looks like. So she still has a little bit of length to gain, but she's looking great. She's doing good. Maka'ala was that juvie. So this juvie was only in rehab for 2 months. She's kicking it. She's 5 years old at French Frigate, getting really not quite to the pupping point, but definitely looking like heading in that direction. Oh, and I thought I had Mayola, but I don't. She's still fat. She's still fat and happy. So what's going to happen from now on? We are continuing to go to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Those 8 seals that survived past rehab are 8 seals that wouldn't have been in the population otherwise. Those guys were going to die. So that's kind of our motivation to keep going forward, is every year we learn something new, and we still have those 8, and they could produce pups, and then they're going to have 16, and then, so on down the line to add to the population. We're constantly improving enrichment during rehabilitation. Kay Carroll is not alone in this endeavor. There's lots of talks with behaviorists and other people that have been in rehab, have dealt with this situation. So we're constantly learning, trying to find new devices to maybe hide some fish, or have a fish surprise come out of nowhere. I don't know. Things that will help them be more active and not just be lazy and get fed. We still want to decrease as much human exposure as possible. They're doing a great job over there. The seals hardly ever see them unless they need an exam. You can never do too much as far as decreasing their exposure to humans. And we're always learning. So every year we learn something new. We'll change something in the protocol. We'll notice something worked for this seal that didn't work for the other one. Because frankly, monk seals have very individual personalities. So one seal will do awesome at this type of restraint feed. This seal will hate it and fight you with every ounce of their being. You just don't know. They're very charismatic. I'm sure they could tell you a story if they could actually talk. So all of this rehabilitation could not be done without way more people outside of NOAA. So I do want to thank all these organizations. We could not help try to save the species without all of these guys. And I really want to say thank you to everyone. And to that, do I have any questions? Any questions? Yeah.
Do the mothers teach the pups anything in that 5 to 7 week window?
That's a really good question. Often they're on the beach nursing. They do go swimming, but we don't have any underwater footage of what that is. They don't go out far to where like the good fish is to eat. So if they're doing anything, they're just peeking in the shallows under rocks. So we actually don't know what they're teaching them, if anything. Yeah.
Have you ever had any seals that you felt couldn't go back into the wild? And if so, what did you do with them?
Excellent question. We are concerned about habituation in rehab. So we've been able to release almost every seal. The one seal that comes to mind is Hoa at the Waikiki Aquarium. He's little Dickens. There's a whole long story, but he started to play with people and children, and when seals get to be a certain age, that's very dangerous. So before he could drown someone, it was kind of behavioral wise, we needed to take another route and think of something else. As space opened up at the aquarium and they agreed to take him. That's rare, but we do think of that, of if they need to come out of the wild, where can they go? And there's not a lot of space. Yeah.
Have you ever had any monk seals that died on the ship?
Great question. We have not. Knock on wood. They are unstable, so we do look for that all the time. And we've had a couple of patients we were very overtly watching them just to make sure if something happened we could intervene. But luckily, we've had no deaths on the ship.
How did those frog seals get to, what is it, Michigan or Minnesota?
Oh yeah, so we those seals are females that were actually at SeaWorld in San Antonio, and they were, if I remember correctly, from Laysan. I don't exactly know how they got there, but they are blind. They couldn't really be released back in the wild with their conditions, so they stayed at San Antonio, and then Minnesota Zoo had this huge facility opened up, and it actually was just a better fit for both organizations, and they were shipped up there, doing well. Yeah.
So in the Northwest Hawaiian population, it really sounds like malnutrition and lack of fish is an issue. What are some things that are, if there's anything being done policy-wise, to help try and bolster those ecosystems?
I'm glad you bring that up. It's not so much there's not enough fish, it's just that they're not skilled enough to catch them. So the theory is that sharks and alua are actually just out-maneuvering them. So the seal will actually get a fish, but then the shark takes it, or something like that. So there is enough fish, it's just the skills to get the fish is a theory. Yeah.
And there's many reasons for malnutrition.
Mostly, it's not being able to catch the fish, but in a normal wild population, you can seals can get tapeworms, and every seal in the wild has tapeworms. It's just part of life. But when you're already so skinny, those tapeworms are taking all the nutrients out of your body too. So we've done some preliminary studies if deworming will help these seals. Right now, the trick is how to administer the medication. We know orally works, but we don't have staff out there to go out and tube feed all these seals. That's a massive undertaking. We've tried shots and topical, and neither have been proven to be effective. So there is more studies being done to try to get a dewormer, a different type of shot, because we vaccinate seals out there with a pulse syringe. If we could get a dewormer to work in that way, then that would be another step that we would take, but that's very preliminary. There's much more studying and research that needs to be done at the Marine Mammal Center. So that's a few years out. That's a good question. Yeah.
Could you address the recent monster deaths from toxoplasmosis and how we deal with the feral cat?
That's a great question. So it was about toxoplasmosis in feral cats. Our stance is cats should be indoors. That's such a big policy issue as far as ferals go. NOAA's not taken a direct part to do anything with the physical cat, but wants to spread the science to the policymakers so they can make the best choice. Toxo is fatal to monk seals. There's a huge risk there. We are also trying to, is there a way to detect toxo better? Is there parts of the island might have more than others? Right now, it's all big questions that we don't know. So the cat thing that she's talking about is that toxo is a parasite that multiplies only in a cat gut. Why? I don't know, but that's where it comes from. It doesn't multiply and spread in any other animal. Any animal can get toxo. People can get toxo, but the animals that are spreading the eggs are going to be cats, and they do it at billions of eggs every time. So that's why we want to address the cat situations, because it's the cats that are spreading it. Yes.
Any toxo on the Northwest Hawaiian Islands?
You know, we had one seal come back that was a suspect positive for toxo, but it was suspect, and we can't actually prove it. So there's no feral cats on the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. We have not detected it in anything else. So I can't say no, there's not, but the probability they'll come across toxo in Northwestern is lower.
Years ago, we were hiking kind of a point, and there was like an adult monk seal with a huge shark wound.
Mhm.
How well do they recover from a shark bite?
They actually have extraordinary healing capacities, and I wish I had a picture. There was a weaned pup that was bit down to the muscle, and the whole half of the body was gone. And a few months later, it was all healed up. So their abilities to heal in the wild are actually extraordinary. So there's even like minor wounds in the main islands because they can heal so well, and stress is a factor that could make injuries worse. Often we just let them heal on their own. But big ones, of course, will intervene. But yeah, they can. I would say most seals have some type of scar that we can identify them with, and some are just bigger than others. Yeah.
Sounds like a lot of, there's just a lack of information to the general public.
Okay.
What would you suggest would be a good path to kind of lead people down to help really the species? Like, are there organizations that they can support, donations they can give to, or different organizations that you volunteer for?
That's a great question. There's so much information and so many different routes to go through to help spread, the word, the science word. And offhand, we have, like, if you want to volunteer with monk seals, like HMAR is going to be an organization, they're over here, that we work with pretty closely to help monitor the seals. They get a lot of information. All of the information that we publish in scientific journals is on our website, on the NOAA website. So if you don't want to read a whole scientific article, there's summaries too. But to get information out is pretty tricky because to make science interesting, it takes a very particular, awesome person and a way to communicate that. And that's a very important thing in science is how to, we find the science, we got all kinds of science to back this up, but how to communicate it out to get it to a place where it's understood and people will listen. Going off my rant. But yeah, it is a loaded question. For monk seals, HMAR is great. For other types of information, just kind of like research your specific question, look for nonprofits that might deal in that direction. And you can always start with NOAA, Fish and Wildlife, DLNR to start your searches, and they can branch out to what exactly you're looking for.
Also, can I interject
Mhm.
just for a second? If you learned a lot from Angie in this talk, we do stream our seminars live, and whatever is streamed live is actually available to view later as a video link on YouTube at our Hanauma Talks channel. So our Hanauma Talks channel actually has 3 years of monk seal research by the Hawaiian Monk Seal Research Program. So if you're interested in just watching, basically it's kind of like TV, you're not going to see the speaker, but you'll see their slides and hear their explanation go along with it. That's a good way to learn too. There's a talk actually about toxoplasmosis and monk seals by Michelle Barbieri, who that's viewed a lot because it's a hot topic with the Hawaiian monk seal.
I've heard some individuals talking before with me in our Native Hawaiian community who weren't really believing monk seals were part of the native environment. Have you run into that at all?
We run into that quite frequently. And that's a great example of trying to get the information out. We do have like community meetings or town hall meetings, where we want to call them, where we invite local community members that might disagree with us. Like, we want to talk to those people that might disagree with us because we do see it a lot. Some communities are more vocal than others. Obviously, this community is not that, but it's important for us to work with the local communities because massive disagreements and hostility doesn't get us anywhere. Like, we want to partner because a lot of these people have valuable information and they can do a lot of good, a lot of help with monk seals. One thing in the main islands, for example, is monk seals get hooked a lot, and they might get them in their cheek, they might swallow it. If that happens, we want to know because we want to save the animal, something like that. No one's gonna, really investigate, if you will, but it's going to be saving the animals our priority. I know that fishing can be kind of a hot topic, so we believe in fishing for the communities. We believe in, recreation fishing for your families. All that is wonderful. We want to work with those people too. So that's a great question, and that's something that we're constantly working on. Yeah.
How many times in a lifetime?
That's a great question. So, actually depends on if you're in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands or the main Hawaiian Islands. The main Hawaiian Island females can pup as early as 4, which is very young. The Northwestern Hawaiian Islands is going to be more like 10. And then they live to be late 20s. They can live up to their early 30s. They don't quite pup that long. But during that time, you'll see a monk seal pup maybe every 3 to 4 years. But they do take breaks every once in a while. So there'll be a year where they don't pup. So 7, 8, it's really variable based on the female, because some females will pup 1 year and not do it again for a few years, and some are regularly pupping every single year. It's, I guess, what they feel.
You said it was different from Northwestern and the main Hawaiian Islands. What was the difference? They had more frequent pups on the main Hawaiian Islands?
They start pupping earlier. And so the body condition of the main Hawaiian Island seals, they're better than the Northwestern Hawaiian Island seals. So the pups here get huge, like those big blubber balls. Like, we measure their axillary girth, so how round they are, and in the main Hawaiian Islands they could be in centimeters, 130, 140 centimeters, where in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands we're talking on average about 100 to 110. So there's bigger seals here. And why, I can't tell you, other than there's less predators around here that have that stealing the fish situation as a theory. But it's just our numbers just show that they just are nice and big here. Yeah.
Do you ever see a population shift at all from the Northwestern towards the Hawaiian Islands?
We've not seen the population shift. We've had a couple individuals show up, not enough to spark a shift, but they tend to stay at their birth island or go 1 to 2 islands over. That's the average. Most females will pup at their actual birth site where they were born. That's a very common thing. We have a record of 1 seal coming all the way down the chain, but I don't know what their motivation was. But on average, the populations are gonna pretty much have, in the past at least, stayed in the 2 regions. Yes.
Then how do you explain 300 seals on the main Hawaiian Islands?
So that's a great question. There is some holes in the data, like in Ni'ihau, which is main Hawaiian Island. We haven't been able to get there, the private island. When seals become healthier and the population is just very slowly starts to grow, they just start to appear because people happen to see them. Whereas before, if there was, on Oahu, if there was 20 seals, I'm making that number up, but if there was only 20 seals, they're going to be out in points that are just not commonly seen. And now as those 20 seals increase, we happen to see them more often. So there was not this big flush of seals from the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands because we have those individuals tagged. It could be holes in the data from Ni'ihau, and then they were just doing well on their own.